Welcome back, dear Acolyte. I am pleased to see you again. Across Tamriel, a storm is gathering, one that doesn't roar with thunder, but moves with the quiet precision of a blade in the dark. They are known as the Thalmor, champions of elven supremacy, enforcers of a new world order, and the architects of a vision that could reshape the very essence of the Empire. But who are these figures whose influence spreads with such cold determination? What lies behind their polished diplomacy and golden armor, and why does their power grow unchecked, casting a long and ominous shadow over all who oppose them? Tonight, we explore the rise of the Thalmor, uncovering their hidden motives, their history marked by both glory and ruthlessness, and their relentless quest for control. As we examine the true nature of this rising threat, it becomes clear that the Thalmor's ambitions reach far beyond politics, endangering the very future of Tamriel itself. So, stay with me, Acolyte, as we unravel the mystery of the Thalmor, a force whose golden hands may one day tighten their grip on an entire continent. The Aldmeri Dominion was forged in an era where the survival of Mer required a unifying power. In these times of chaos and decline, the Altmer, the High Elves of Somerset, began to realize their place in history was slipping away. The foundations of what would become the Thalmor were laid in response to a world that seemed to conspire against them, driven by the belief that their culture was under siege. The origins of the Thalmor cannot be understood without first considering the Altmer's deep connection to their homeland, Somerset, and their role in shaping Tamrielic history. The Altmer saw themselves as the purest descendants of the Aedra, the original divines, and thus considered themselves the rightful rulers of Nirn. This belief was deeply rooted in their culture and influenced their political and social structures. For centuries, the Altmer led insular lives, focusing on preserving their ancient traditions and maintaining the purity of their bloodlines. They were content in their isolation, viewing the affairs of the other races, particularly the humans, as beneath their concern. Yet, as history has shown time and again, isolation can breed vulnerability. The decline of the first Aldmeri Dominion marked a turning point for the Altmer. The great Crystal Tower, once the pinnacle of their civilization and a symbol of their unity, fell, leaving a profound vacuum of power. This loss, coupled with the growing threats from the rising human kingdoms and the chaotic forces of oblivion, forced the Altmer to reconsider their place in the world. They could no longer remain passive observers in the grand theater of Tamriel. They had to take action to secure their future. In this climate of uncertainty, the Thalmor emerged as a powerful political entity, driven by a vision of restoring elven dominance. They were not a new creation, but rather an evolution of older, more traditional factions within Altmer society. The Thalmor were initially a group of radical thinkers who believed that the only way to protect the Altmer and their way of life was through direct intervention in the affairs of Tamriel. They saw the decline of the First Dominion not as a failure, but as a lesson that the Altmer must lead, not from behind the safety of their islands, but from the forefront of power. The early leadership of the Thalmor consisted of influential Altmer who were deeply committed to their cause. Figures such as Queen Irene, who later played a pivotal role in the formation of the Third Aldmeri Dominion, were instrumental in shaping the Thalmor's policies and strategies. Their initial goals were clear: to re-establish elven supremacy, to reclaim the lost glories of the First Dominion, and to eliminate any threats to their vision of a unified elven rule. They viewed themselves as the stewards of the true Aldmeri legacy, destined to guide not just the Altmer, but all of Tamriel, towards a future where the Mer, the rightful rulers of Nirn, would reclaim their dominance. In these early days, the Thalmor's rise was marked by a combination of political cunning and brute force. They understood that to achieve their goals, they needed to consolidate power within Somerset first, before extending their influence across Tamriel. The Thalmor were ruthless in their methods, silencing dissent within their ranks and eliminating any opposition that threatened their plans. Their ideology, which was steeped in a mix of elven supremacy and religious fervor, resonated with many Aldmer who feared the loss of their culture and identity in a rapidly changing world. The origins of the Thalmor are thus a story of a people who, facing the decline of their civilization, chose to fight back against the tides of history. They were driven by a deep-seated belief in their own superiority and a desire to restore what they saw as the natural order of the world. As the first Aldmeri Dominion crumbled under the weight of internal dissent and external pressures, the political landscape of the Somerset Isles was left in disarray. The power vacuum created by the fall of the Dominion was not merely a matter of shifting borders, but a profound disturbance in the very fabric of Aldmer society. The once unified vision of elven supremacy began to splinter, and the dream of a united Tamriel under Merish rule seemed all but lost. The remnants of the Dominion were scattered, with no clear leadership to guide the Aldmer through these tumultuous times. The fall of the Crystal Tower, a symbol of the Aldmer's ancient heritage and their connection to the divine, marked a significant turning point. This towering structure, revered as a monument to the spirit of the elven people, had stood as a beacon of Aldmeri culture and power. Its destruction not only dealt a severe blow to the morale of the Aldmer, but also signaled the end of an era. The tower's fall was more than a physical collapse. It represented the shattering of the Aldmer's sense of invincibility and their divine right to rule. The loss of such a potent symbol left the Aldmer reeling, searching for a new sense of identity and purpose. In the wake of these events, the Somerset Isles were rife with uncertainty. The once mighty Dominion was reduced to a shadow of its former self, and the Aldmer found themselves vulnerable to both internal strife and external threats. The power vacuum that emerged was quickly filled by various factions, each vying for control and influence. The Thalmor, initially a fringe group with radical ideas about elven supremacy, began to gain traction during this period of instability. Their message of reclaiming the glory of the Aldmer and restoring their rightful place as rulers of Tamriel resonated with a population desperate for direction. As the Thalmor's influence grew, they capitalized on the weakened state of the Dominion and the Aldmer's disillusionment with their current leaders. They positioned themselves as the saviors of elven kind, promising to restore the honor and power of the Aldmer by any means necessary. The Crystal Tower's fall and the subsequent power vacuum provided the perfect conditions for the Thalmor to rise to prominence, setting the stage for their eventual dominance over the Somerset Isles and beyond. The Thalmor began as a small faction within the Somerset Isles, initially perceived as little more than a group of radical nationalists. However, they quickly gained momentum by capitalizing on the widespread disillusionment among the Aldmer. Key figures such as Narifin and Eldamil were instrumental in shaping the early Thalmor ideology, which revolved around the belief that the Aldmer were the rightful rulers of Tamriel, and that the world had been corrupted by the influence of humans and their false gods. As the Thalmor solidified their power, they began to attract a following among the Aldmer elite. Many of these early supporters were disillusioned by the failures of the First Dominion and were eager to see a return to the days when the Aldmer were the undisputed masters of Tamriel. The Thalmor's early leadership was characterized by a blend of religious zealotry and political pragmatism. They were determined to reshape the world in their image, and they believed that the ends justified any means necessary. The Thalmor's initial goals were both ambitious and clear: to re-establish the Aldmeri Dominion as the dominant power in Tamriel, to eliminate any threats to their supremacy, and to purge the world of what they saw as the corrupting influence of human culture and religion. They viewed the empire as a direct threat to their goals and sought to weaken it through both overt and covert means. Their ideology was deeply rooted in the belief that the Aldmeri were not only superior to humans, but also destined to rule over them. These early Thalmor were ruthless in their pursuit of power. They were willing to use any means necessary to achieve their goals, including assassination, manipulation, and propaganda. They were also adept at exploiting the weaknesses of their enemies, particularly the fractured state of the empire following the Oblivion Crisis. By the time they had fully established themselves as the ruling power in the Somerset Isles, the Thalmor had already begun to lay the groundwork for the reformation of the Aldmeri Dominion and the eventual conquest of Tamriel. Their view on the relations between humans and Mer was stark and unyielding. To the Thalmor, humans were a lesser species, an unfortunate deviation from the true path of creation. They believed that the existence of humans was a cosmic error, one that had diluted the divine essence of Nirn. This belief extended to their disdain for Talos, a human who ascended to godhood, which they saw as a blasphemous affront to the natural order. The Thalmor's ideological framework was also deeply entwined with their understanding of the Aedra and Daedra. They revered the Aedra as the creators and sustainers of the world, though their veneration was selective, favoring those deities who embodied the virtues they held dear: order, purity, and the preservation of their cultural heritage. The Daedra, in contrast, were viewed with suspicion and fear, seen as chaotic forces that threatened the order they sought to impose. Their interpretation of history was heavily revisionist, designed to reinforce their belief in the inevitability of Aldmeri dominance. The Thalmor propagated a narrative that cast the Aldmeri Dominion as the true inheritors of Nirn, downplaying or outright denying the contributions and achievements of the human empires that had risen and fallen throughout Tamriel's history. This version of history was taught rigorously in the institutions under their control, ensuring that future generations of Aldmeri would internalize these beliefs as unquestionable truths. The Thalmor's interpretation of history is not merely an academic exercise. It is a deliberate and calculated endeavor to shape the very foundation of reality within the Aldmeri Dominion. The Thalmor seized upon the malleable nature of history, reinterpreting events to cast the Aldmeri as the rightful rulers of Tamriel, chosen by divine providence. This narrative, propagated through all forms of communication, seeks to cement their authority and justify their actions, no matter how draconian. The Thalmor's revisionist approach often involved the careful selection of historical events and figures, elevating those that aligned with their vision while obscuring or outright erasing those that did not. Their scholars meticulously crafted a version of history that painted the rise of the Aldmeri Dominion as an inevitable and necessary course correction in the chaotic world of Tamriel. They portrayed the Mer as the rightful stewards of the world, with the Thalmor as the vanguard of this ancient destiny, destined to restore order to a land plagued by the folly of men. This narrative of legitimacy was further bolstered by the use of historical myths and legends, which were repurposed to serve the Thalmor's goals. Ancient tales of Aldmeri heroes and the glory of the Somerset Isles were revived and retold with a distinctly Thalmor twist, emphasizing themes of superiority and divine right. The Thalmor harnessed these stories to cultivate a sense of pride and inevitability among their followers, while also instilling fear and obedience in those who might dare to oppose them. By controlling the narrative of history, the Thalmor not only sought to rewrite the past, but also to dictate the future, ensuring that their vision of Tamriel would prevail. In this pursuit, the Thalmor's manipulation of history became a powerful tool of propaganda, used to rally their supporters and intimidate their enemies. The collapse of the Second Dominion left the Aldmeri vulnerable to other races and the loss of their influence. Yet the Thalmor, driven by their conviction of elven superiority, viewed this as a moment to reassert their dominance. With their rigid ideology and fervent ambition, they began the groundwork for a new dominion. Key events leading to the formation of the Third Dominion involved a blend of strategic alliances, military actions, and political manipulation. The Thalmor understood the necessity of both strength and diplomacy, forging alliances with crucial factions to secure their goals. They allied with the Bosmer of Valenwood, integrating their forested homeland into the Dominion through the Pact of the Green Lady. This alliance was not born of mutual respect, but of the Thalmor's strategic need for the Bosmer's resources and tactical positioning. The Khajiit of Elsewhere also came under their influence, with the Thalmor capitalizing on a lunar crisis to present themselves as saviors, thus bringing Elsewhere into the Dominion through political subjugation and religious manipulation. Queen Irene, a charismatic and idealistic leader, played a vital role in the reformation of the Dominion. Her vision of a united Tamriel under the Dominion's banner resonated with many Aldmer. However, it was the Thalmor who truly held the reins, guiding her every move to align with their broader agenda. Figures like Ancano and other key Thalmor operatives worked behind the scenes, ensuring that Queen Irene's decisions furthered their ultimate goal of restoring elven dominance across Tamriel. Under this orchestrated leadership, the Third Aldmeri Dominion rose from the ashes of its predecessor, stronger, more determined, and backed by powerful allies. Emerging from the remnants of the Second Dominion, the Thalmor's calculated strategy to restore Aldmer dominance relied not only on military might, but also on shrewd diplomacy. Their ascent was as much a matter of tactical genius as it was of ideological zeal. Military force became a key tool for the Thalmor as they sought to expand their influence beyond the borders of Somerset. The Dominion's armies, composed of elite Altmer warriors and battle mages, were instrumental in asserting control over Valenwood and Elsewhere. The Thalmor were not content with mere conquest. They sought to reshape these lands in their image, enforcing their laws, culture, and ideology on the subjugated populations. This militaristic approach was complemented by carefully crafted alliances with key figures and factions within these regions, ensuring that resistance was minimized and loyalty to the Dominion was secured. Diplomacy played an equally vital role in the Thalmor's expansionist agenda. They were acutely aware that brute force alone would not secure their dominance in Tamriel. Through a series of strategic marriages, pacts, and negotiations, the Thalmor extended their influence into the courts of other nations. Their diplomatic efforts were often backed by the implicit threat of military action, a tactic that proved highly effective in bending the wills of weaker rulers. A pinnacle of their diplomatic efforts was the negotiation of the White Gold Concordat with the Mede Empire. The treaty, which officially ended the Great War, was a masterstroke of Thalmor strategy. Though it required significant sacrifices on both sides, the Concordat solidified the Dominion's power and, more importantly, outlawed the worship of Talos within the Empire. This provision, while seemingly minor, was a critical component of the Thalmor's broader ideological campaign to erase the influence of the so-called Ninth Divine from Tamriel. The enforcement of this ban became a cornerstone of Thalmor policy, leading to widespread persecution of Talos worshippers and further entrenching their power within the Empire's borders. The Thalmor's rise was met with a mix of fear and resistance. In Cyrodiil, the Empire found itself reeling from the loss of the Great War. The White Gold Concordat became a bitter symbol of the Empire's weakening power. The Thalmor's presence in imperial territories, enforcing the ban on Talos worship, was a constant reminder of the Dominion's influence. This control extended into the highest levels of the Empire's government, where Thalmor agents manipulated politics to further their own goals. The impact on local politics was profound, In Skyrim, the enforced ban on Talos worship became a rallying cry for rebellion. The Nords, fiercely independent and proud of their heritage, saw the Thalmor as foreign oppressors. This resentment would eventually ignite the flames of civil war, with the Stormcloaks rising against what they perceived as the Empire's betrayal. Elsewhere in Tamriel, the Thalmor's influence sowed discord and unrest, destabilizing regions that had once been firm in their loyalty to the Empire. The Thalmor's influence also permeated societal norms and religious practices. In regions under their control, the worship of Talos was not merely outlawed, it was actively persecuted. Thalmor justiciars, roving enforcers of the Dominion's will, patrolled the roads, hunting down those who defied their edicts. The fear of these enforcers spread, silencing opposition and driving Talos worship underground. Temples were desecrated, and relics of Talos were destroyed or hidden away. This religious persecution left scars on the collective psyche of those who had once worshipped freely, deepening the divide between the Thalmor and the people they sought to rule. The Thalmor's impact extended beyond mere political and religious control. They sought to reshape the cultural landscape of Tamriel, imposing their own values and ideals. In education, art, and literature, the Thalmor promoted an Aldmeri-centric view of history and society, erasing or rewriting the contributions of other races. This cultural imperialism aimed to create a Tamriel more aligned with the Thalmor's vision of mere superiority. But it also sparked resistance from those who valued their own traditions and histories. In some regions, underground movements emerged, dedicated to preserving their cultural heritage in defiance of Thalmor influence. In the negotiations that led to the White Gold Concordat, the fate of Tamriel was decided in shadowy halls and behind closed doors. The Empire, weakened by the ravages of the Great War, found itself at the mercy of the Aldmeri Dominion. The Thalmor, relentless in their pursuit of dominion over Tamriel, saw this as their moment to strike a decisive blow against their enemies, both political and religious. The treaty's key terms, dictated by the Dominion with ruthless efficiency, stripped the Empire of much of its power. The outlawing of Talos worship was not merely a concession, it was a calculated attack on the very identity of the Nords, a people who revered Talos as their god-hero. The Thalmor insisted on this provision, not only to weaken the Empire, but to assert their own ideological supremacy. The Empire, under Emperor Titus Mede II, had little choice but to comply, knowing that refusal would mean continued bloodshed and likely total defeat. The negotiations themselves were a masterclass in Thalmor diplomacy. They offered the Empire just enough to survive, but at a cost that would fracture its unity and sow seeds of rebellion. The Aldmeri Dominion's negotiators, led by cunning and skilled diplomats, knew precisely how to exploit the Empire's desperation. The result was a treaty that favored the Dominion in every way, from territorial gains to the crippling restrictions imposed on the Empire's religious practices. Public reaction to the treaty was immediate and visceral. In Cyrodiil, the heart of the Empire, there was a sense of humiliation and betrayal. Many saw the Concordat as a stain on the honor of the Empire, a capitulation to an enemy they had fought so fiercely. In Skyrim, the reaction was even more intense. The Nords, with their deep reverence for Talos, were outraged. To them, the White Gold Concordat was not just a political agreement. It was an attack on their very way of life. This anger would soon ignite into open rebellion with the rise of the Stormcloaks under Ulfric Stormcloak. The Thalmor, however, viewed the Concordat as a triumph. They had achieved through diplomacy what they could not fully accomplish through war: the subjugation of the Empire and the imposition of their will on Tamriel. For the Thalmor, this was not just a political victory, but a step closer to their ultimate goal, the domination of all Tamriel under the rule of the Aldmeri Dominion. The enforcement of the treaty's terms was not limited to religious persecution. The Thalmor extended their influence into the political and military spheres, ensuring that Skyrim remained under their watchful eye. They positioned themselves as both enforcers and overseers, manipulating imperial officials and sowing discord where it served their interests. The presence of Thalmor agents in the courts of Skyrim's Jarls further inflamed tensions, as Nords bristled at the intrusion of elven authority into their traditional ways. Public and political reactions to the White Gold Concordat varied across Skyrim. While some Jarls, eager to maintain peace and avoid further conflict with the Dominion, complied with the treaty's terms, others resisted, seeing it as a betrayal of their culture and heritage. Ulfric Stormcloak, Jarl of Windhelm, emerged as a leading voice of dissent, his defiance of the Thalmor's edicts fueling the fires of rebellion. To many Nords, the Concordat was not merely a treaty, but a symbol of the Empire's weakness and the Thalmor's overreach. This growing discontent laid the groundwork for the civil war that would soon engulf Skyrim, a conflict in which the Thalmor played a more insidious role than many realized. In the early years of Skyrim's civil war, the Thalmor's role was subtle, yet profound. The Thalmor did not merely observe from afar. They actively stoked the flames of rebellion, ensuring that the conflict grew into a full-blown war. Their involvement was shrouded in secrecy, hidden behind political maneuvers and shadowy agents. The Empire's response to the Stormcloak rebellion was swift but divided. General Tullius, a seasoned military leader, was dispatched to Skyrim to quash the uprising. However, his task was far from easy. The Thalmor's influence extended into the ranks of the Empire's soldiers, sowing distrust and uncertainty. This internal discord, coupled with the Thalmor's covert support of the Stormcloaks, ensured that the conflict would drag on, draining both sides of their strength and resources. Throughout the war, the Thalmor's presence was felt in every corner of Skyrim. Their agents moved silently among the people, manipulating events to suit their agenda, while the Nords and Imperials fought bitterly over the future of their land. The Thalmor watched with cold detachment, knowing that no matter the outcome, they would be the true victors. In the bitter cold of Skyrim, where the winds howl through the ancient mountains and the forests stand as silent sentinels, the Thalmor's presence was more than a shadow. It was a force, an iron grip tightening around the throat of a divided land. The civil war that erupted in Skyrim was not merely a clash of ideals between the Stormcloaks and the Empire. It was a battlefield where the Thalmor's influence, cunning, and malice played out in ways that many failed to see. While the Nords fought for their beliefs, the Thalmor watched, manipulated, and maneuvered, their actions shaping the course of the conflict as much as any battle or siege. The Thalmor, under the guise of diplomatic emissaries, were anything but neutral in the war. They had a vested interest in the Empire's victory, yet at the same time, they subtly fanned the flames of rebellion. By ensuring that the civil war continued, the Thalmor weakened both the Stormcloaks and the Empire, draining their resources and morale. This strategy was brilliantly executed, with agents like Elenwen, the Thalmor ambassador in Skyrim, orchestrating events behind the scenes. The Thalmor played a delicate game, ensuring that neither side gained the upper hand too quickly, thereby prolonging the conflict and keeping both factions embroiled in bloodshed and strife. Thalmor justiciars patrolled the roads, enforcing the terms of the White Gold Concordat with ruthless efficiency. They hunted down Talos worshippers, interrogated suspects, and executed those who defied their authority. But their presence was not just about enforcing laws, it was about sowing fear and discord. The justiciars were a symbol of Thalmor power and a constant reminder of the Dominion's reach. Their actions in Skyrim were part of a larger strategy to destabilize the province from within, making it easier for the Thalmor to exert control once the dust of the Civil War settled. Key figures in the Thalmor's Skyrim operations included agents like Aldmeri, stationed in Markarth, who oversaw the persecution of Talos worshippers in the Reach. His arrogance and disdain for the Nords were palpable, and his presence in the city was a testament to the Thalmor's influence over the Empire's puppet government. Aldmeri, like many Thalmor, believed in the inherent superiority of the Aldmeri and saw the Nords as little more than rebellious children in need of discipline. This attitude fueled the resentment and hatred that many in Skyrim felt toward the Thalmor, further driving the wedge between the Nords and the Empire. The resolution of the Civil War in Skyrim marked a turning point, not only for the province itself, but also for the Thalmor and their overarching ambitions in Tamriel. As the conflict drew to a close, the Thalmor, ever calculating, began to assess the outcomes and reposition themselves within the shifting power dynamics of a war-torn Skyrim. In the final stages of the war, the Thalmor's influence was undeniable, though often shrouded in subtlety and indirect manipulation. The Stormcloaks, emboldened by their desire for independence and the restoration of Talos worship, had effectively weakened the Imperial presence in Skyrim. The Empire, already compromised by the White Gold Concordat, found itself fighting a war on two fronts, one with the Stormcloaks and the other with the lingering spectre of Thalmor oversight. The Thalmor, for their part, carefully navigated these turbulent waters, ensuring that whichever side emerged victorious, their objectives would remain within reach. As the final battles raged and the Civil War drew to its inevitable conclusion, the Thalmor were quick to adjust their strategies. They had covertly supported the continuation of the conflict, knowing that a weakened Skyrim, divided and ravaged by war, would be easier to manipulate. Whether through espionage, political pressure, or direct intervention, the Thalmor played both sides, ensuring that neither could achieve a decisive victory without heavy cost. This strategy, though ruthless, proved effective, leaving Skyrim fractured and its people weary of further conflict. The aftermath of the war saw the Thalmor solidifying their position in Skyrim. With the White Gold Concordat still in effect, they continued their relentless persecution of Talos worshippers, using the weakened state of the province to further enforce their draconian policies. The presence of Thalmor justiciars increased as they took advantage of the chaos to root out any remaining dissent. Their actions were met with both fear and resentment, but the Thalmor were undeterred, their focus on maintaining control unwavering. The legacy of the Civil War, however, was not one of complete victory for the Thalmor. The war had sown deep divisions within Skyrim, and the resentment toward the Thalmor only grew in the years that followed. While they had succeeded in weakening the province and furthering their control, they had also created a breeding ground for future resistance. The Nords, proud and resilient, began to harbor a deep-seated hatred for the Thalmor, one that would simmer beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to ignite. In the wake of the Civil War, Skyrim remained a province on the edge, caught between the demands of the Empire and the ever-present threat of Thalmor oppression. The Thalmor's position, though strong, was not unassailable, and the legacy of the Civil War ensured that their control would always be met with resistance, both overt and covert. The Thalmor, however, were patient, ever watchful for the next opportunity to tighten their grip on Skyrim. The Thalmor's plans for expansion in Tamriel were multifaceted and meticulously executed. They sought to re-establish the dominance of the Aldmeri Dominion, not just as a political entity, but as the supreme power in Tamriel. This vision was bolstered by their belief that the Thalmor were the rightful heirs to the legacy of the Ayleids, the ancient rulers of Cyrodiil, To achieve this, they employed a combination of military might, political manipulation, and cultural assimilation, aiming to bring other provinces under their control or influence. Key strategies of the Thalmor included fostering unrest and exploiting weaknesses in other regions. In Hammerfell, they incited and supported the uprising of the Red Guards against the Empire, aiming to weaken both the Empire and Hammerfell. In Cyrodiil, they sowed discord among the nobility, using espionage and assassinations to destabilize the imperial government. Meanwhile, in Morrowind, they subtly supported the House Telvanni's ambitions, hoping to create a divided and weakened province that would be easier to manipulate. The Thalmor's ambitions were not without opposition. The Empire, though weakened, remained a formidable obstacle. The Red Guards, who fiercely defended their independence, thwarted the Thalmor's plans in Hammerfell. In Cyrodiil, the Blades, though diminished in number, continued to resist Thalmor influence, working in the shadows to protect the remnants of the Empire. Meanwhile, in Morrowind, the Dunmer proved to be a resilient people, unwilling to bend to Thalmor pressure. However, the Thalmor were nothing if not adaptable. They adjusted their strategies, turning to diplomatic means when force failed, and using cultural influence where politics and warfare could not reach. Their propaganda efforts were widespread, aiming to rewrite the history of Tamriel to favor their narrative. Through this, they sought to legitimize their rule and undermine the cultural identities of the other races, promoting the idea that the Aldmeri Dominion was the natural and rightful ruler of Tamriel. Their ambitions were not only territorial, but also cultural and religious. The Thalmor sought to impose their own beliefs and values on the rest of Tamriel, particularly their rejection of Talos and the divines associated with the Empire. This was not just an attack on religious freedom, but an effort to erase the cultural and spiritual identities of the other races, replacing them with the Thalmor's own ideology. The reaction of other Tamrielic powers to the Thalmor's expansionist policies was mixed. Some, like the Argonians of Black Marsh, remained largely indifferent, content to maintain their independence and isolation. The Thalmor's ambitions reach into the heartlands of Elsewhere and Valenwood, regions renowned for their unique cultures and resilient inhabitants. In Valenwood, the verdant realm of the Bosmer, the Thalmor sought to weave their influence into the very fabric of local governance. They presented themselves as benevolent overseers, offering economic incentives and political alliances to sway the Bosmeri leaders towards the Dominion's agenda. Through strategic marriages and alliances, the Thalmor embedded themselves within the noble houses, subtly steering decisions that would align Valenwood's policies with Aldmeri interests. This manipulation often went unnoticed, masked by the Bosmer's natural inclination towards diplomacy and balance. However, beneath the surface of these diplomatic overtures lay a more insidious strategy. The Thalmor capitalized on existing tensions and disputes within Valenwood, exacerbating conflicts to weaken local resistance. By supporting certain factions over others, they ensured that no single group could gain enough power to challenge their overarching influence. This divide-and-conquer approach not only destabilized the region, but also made it easier for the Dominion to assert control without facing unified opposition. The Thalmor's presence in Valenwood was thus a double-edged sword, offering stability on one hand, while dismantling the very structures that could resist their dominance on the other. In Elsewhere, the land of the Khajiit, the Thalmor employed a different set of tactics, tailored to the unique societal structures of the region. They leveraged the Khajiit's intricate trade networks, integrating Thalmor agents into key positions within the caravan systems. This allowed them to monitor and control the flow of goods and information, ensuring that any dissent could be swiftly identified and suppressed. Moreover, the Thalmor exploited cultural festivals and religious ceremonies to subtly introduce Aldmeri ideologies, fostering a sense of loyalty and dependence among the Khajiit populace. By aligning themselves with the spiritual leaders of elsewhere, the Thalmor secured a foothold in both the economic and spiritual lives of the Khajiit, making their influence pervasive and deeply rooted. In Valenwood, local governance became increasingly entangled with dominion policies, leading to a gradual erosion of traditional Bosmeri autonomy. The introduction of Aldmeri laws and regulations often clashed with long-standing customs, creating a sense of cultural dissonance among the populace. This not only bred resentment, but also fueled underground resistance movements that sought to preserve Valenwood's heritage. The Thalmor responded to these uprisings with a combination of coercion and propaganda, painting the resistance as threats to stability and progress. This cycle of control and resistance entrenched the Thalmor's presence, making it an integral yet controversial part of Valenwood's political landscape. In elsewhere, the societal impact was equally significant. The Thalmor's manipulation of trade and religious practices disrupted traditional Khajiiti ways of life, leading to economic disparities and social unrest. The integration of Aldmeri ideologies into religious ceremonies created internal conflicts within the community, as some Khajiit embraced the changes while others clung to their ancestral beliefs. This cultural tug-of-war weakened the social cohesion of elsewhere, making it easier for the Thalmor to exert their influence without facing a united front. Additionally, the control over trade networks allowed the Thalmor to siphon resources away from local economies, further increasing their leverage over the region's governance and society. The Thalmor's influence in elsewhere and Valenwood was a crucial component of the Aldmeri Dominion's broader expansionist strategy. By securing control over these regions, the Thalmor not only extended the Dominion's territorial reach, but also reinforced its dominance through economic and cultural integration. Valenwood's lush forests and elsewhere's bustling trade routes became vital assets in the Dominion's quest for supremacy, providing both resources and strategic advantages. The seamless integration of these regions into the Dominion's framework demonstrated the Thalmor's adeptness at balancing overt control with subtle manipulation, ensuring that their influence was both pervasive and resilient. Moreover, the success of the Thalmor's strategies in elsewhere and Valenwood served as a model for their operations in other regions. The lessons learned from these endeavors informed their approaches in subsequent territories, refining their methods of political infiltration, economic manipulation, and cultural assimilation. However, long before the Thalmor began their rise to power, the Psijic Order stood as the quiet guardians of knowledge and wisdom. From the Isle of Artium, we played a crucial role in guiding Altmer society, offering counsel to kings and shaping the course of history not through force, but through the old ways. Our philosophy has always centered on balance, harmony, and the pursuit of a deeper understanding, a path that diverged sharply from the rigid authoritarian ambitions of the Thalmor. Our relationship with the Thalmor has always been complex. While they sought to dominate and control, we valued wisdom and guidance. The Thalmor, ever watchful in their quest for absolute power, saw us as a potential threat. Our influence and mastery of mysticism, something they could never fully grasp or command. Yet they recognized our worth in matters where their power alone would not suffice. There were times when they sought our counsel, knowing that our understanding of the old ways could serve their purposes. But this cooperation was fraught with tension. The Thalmor could not tolerate any philosophy that did not align with their own, and our refusal to submit to their ideology was seen as a challenge, a defiance that, in their eyes, could not go unchecked. Throughout the ages, our interactions with the Thalmor have been marked by both conflict and uneasy cooperation. They have attempted to suppress us, seeing our influence as a barrier to their ambitions. And yet, there have been moments when even they had to admit their need for our wisdom, especially in matters of magic and the arcane. Despite their efforts, the Thalmor have never been able to fully control us. We have remained a force within Aldmeri society, our knowledge and ways beyond their reach, ever a reminder that some things cannot be bent to the will of power alone. In recent years, the Secret Order has quietly re-emerged, our influence spreading across Tamriel as we work to restore equilibrium in a world increasingly swayed by the Thalmor's oppressive hand. This resurgence has not gone unnoticed. The Thalmor, ever vigilant and suspicious, have intensified their scrutiny of our activities, perceiving our efforts as a direct threat to their control. There have been whispers of Thalmor agents seeking to infiltrate our ranks, their eyes and ears prying for any sign of dissent or rebellion within our order. They fear the power of the Sigics, knowing full well that our knowledge of the arcane, our mastery of the old ways, and our commitment to preserving the sanctity of Tamriel stand in stark contrast to their revisionist ambitions. The Thalmor's attempts to stifle our influence through covert operations and propaganda only serve to strengthen our resolve. Notable figures within our order have become targets, their movements closely monitored by the Thalmor. Despite this, we remain undeterred, our efforts shrouded in secrecy, our influence subtle yet profound. The Thalmor may brand us as subversive, but their accusations fall on deaf ears. For we are driven by a purpose far greater than mere politics. Our mission is one of preservation, to ensure that the knowledge and traditions of old endure, even in the face of the Thalmor's relentless pursuit of control. As tensions rise, the Thalmor find themselves increasingly frustrated, unable to grasp or eliminate the Sigic threat as easily as they might others. Our order has weathered many storms, and we are well versed in the art of survival. The Thalmor, with all their power and influence, cannot so easily suppress the ancient wisdom that we safeguard. The future is uncertain, but one thing remains clear. The Secret Order will not yield to the Thalmor's vision of Tamriel, for we stand as a beacon of knowledge and balance in a world teetering on the edge of chaos. As the Thalmor continue to navigate the shifting sands of Tamriel's political landscape, their path forward is fraught with both peril and opportunity. The present moment stands as a crucible for the Thalmor, where internal strife and external pressures threaten to reshape their destiny. Internal dissent has become a significant concern within the Thalmor ranks. Despite their firm grip on power, cracks have appeared in their once unified front. Factions within the Thalmor have emerged, each with its own vision for the future of the Aldmeri Dominion. Some members advocate for a more pragmatic approach, recognizing the necessity of adapting to the changing dynamics of Tamriel. Others cling to more radical ideologies, seeking to reinforce the Thalmor's original goals of elven supremacy. This fragmentation poses a risk to their cohesion and effectiveness, potentially undermining their influence across Tamriel. Externally, the Thalmor face mounting challenges from a range of adversaries. The Empire, though weakened, continues to resist Thalmor domination. The spirit of the Stormcloaks, beaten but not unbroken, have resisted the Thalmor's influence in Skyrim. Furthermore, emerging factions within Elsewhere and Valenwood, inspired by the turmoil within the Thalmor, challenge their regional dominance. These external pressures force the Thalmor to constantly adapt their strategies, balancing between aggressive enforcement and diplomatic negotiation. The Thalmor's rigid adherence to their own vision of superiority, combined with their willingness to suppress and eradicate dissent, has set them on a path toward devastation. The potential for widespread destruction and the annihilation of cultures and peoples under their harsh regime is not a distant fear, but a pressing reality that demands immediate and concerted action. To avert such a catastrophic future, it is crucial that their influence be contained and their aggressive strategies met with a unified and resolute response. This means not only addressing their immediate threats, but also dismantling the ideological framework that fuels their expansionist zeal. The future of Tamriel rests on our ability to stand together against the Thalmor menace and to ensure that their destructive trajectory is stopped.